Ah! Hi everybody, and welcome to some more news, a show that is this one. I'm your host, and my name is News Dude. Thanks for tuning in. Now, on Cody's Shody, another name for this show, D, we tend to focus on bad news. You know, kids in cages, the rise of fascism in this country, and the inevitable takeover of this planet by wild boars. Stuff like that. But today, I'm going to start us off with some more news. After decades of scientists and activists and politicians telling us that climate change could destroy our planet, I am happy to report that all those people were wrongo. That's right, you heard me. These alarmists have been saying things like, our planet is at risk, we have to do something for the sake of our planet, but they are all wrongo. Here's some news. Our planet is going to be just fine. And here's some more news, Jack. Human beings will not be, and life in general might not fare so well either. But good news, cockroaches have a good shot of making it, and the maggots and worms will have a pretty good food supply for a while as they feed on our rotting corpses. So there's always a silver lining. But our planet will be okay. Just look at Venus. The greenhouse gases in its atmosphere create a surface temperature of about 800 degrees Fahrenheit, making it impossible for life as we know it to exist there. But as a planet, it's doing just fine. And even if climate change wipes out all the life on this planet, including the creepy crawlies, Earth itself will still be floating around space as a lifeless rock, which still counts as a planet. So take that, scientists! But we may very well be f***ed. Sorry, it's gonna be some more news from here on out. Now, even if we do manage to get our act together and avoid exceeding the 2 degrees Celsius increase that scientists warn could be catastrophic, we are now at a place where we are going to have to adapt to the consequences of our warming planet. One of the most significant effects of climate change will be the migration of the most impacted populations. As communities are forced out of their homes by rising sea levels, devastating storms, floods, wildfires, and droughts, the number of climate refugees will grow. The World Bank estimates that climate change will force over 140 million people to migrate by 2050. Some estimates predict that we could have up to 1 billion environmental migrants over the next 30 years. And make no mistake, this is not some problem for the future, like killer bee drones, or killer robot dog things that chase you through the woods, or tiny little robots with Miley Cyrus's personality. And yes, I'm fully aware that these are all Black Mirror episodes, some of which I haven't seen yet, because who has the time these days, you know? And there's that, like, the Choose Your Own Adventure one, which seems like a lot of work, and my point is that this is happening right now, not the Miley Cyrus thing, the climate refugee thing. An Australian think tank called the Institute for Economics and Peace recently estimated that 61.5% of global displacements were due to climate-related disasters, which is 18 million people. In addition, the effects of climate change contribute to the causes for armed conflict around the world, creating even more refugees. A major factor in the Syrian civil war was a drought in the region that was the worst in 900 years. So how is the global community doing when it comes to the challenge of refugees? Not very well. Like, in all honesty, really hella bad. In response to the refugee crisis caused by the conflicts in the Middle East, right-wing nativist anti-immigrant movements are growing and gaining political power in Europe. But okay, how is the United States doing on all this? Or, to sort of answer the question by rephrasing the question, how is America making great again about it? Well, in fiscal year 2016, the last year of Bacroc insane Obama's presidency, the U.S. admitted about 85,000 refugees into this country. In fiscal year 2018, the number of refugees under the Trump administration plummeted to 22,491. Before Trump, one of the things that this country actually did well was that we admitted more refugees than all other countries combined. For decades, we were number one, not in education or happiness or health or anything else on the screen right now, but we were number one at taking in refugees and contributing to conflicts that create refugees and the size of our prison population and money we spend on war stuff. But anyway, my point is, we were a country accepting of the tired and poor more than the rest of the planet. And the number of refugees Trump admitted in 2018 is the lowest number in 40 years. And 2019 is looking even worse. All this comes at a time when the number of refugees around the world has reached its highest levels since World War II. And the Trump administration recently announced that they're lowering the cap on refugees to 18,000. And considering they have fallen short of their already low caps the last 2 years, and considering, just how the president talks about it, it's likely we won't even admit that many. Just last month, Hurricane Dorian, the strongest Atlantic hurricane on record, decimated the Bahamas, killing over 50 people and counting, and displaced thousands of Bahamians. Over 100 people fleeing this carnage to the US were kicked off of ferries because they didn't have visas, breaking with the standard protocol of only requiring passports under such circumstances. Donald Trump has since denied temporary protected status to people fleeing the devastation of Hurricane Dorian, stating,
"We have to be very careful. Everybody needs totally proper documentation because the Bahamas had some tremendous problems with people going to the Bahamas that weren't supposed to be there. I don't want to allow people that weren't supposed to be in the Bahamas to come into the United States, including some very bad people and some very bad gang members and some very, very bad drug dealers."
And we're just going to take a quick pause on this, real quick, and just take a breath. With our sometimes necessary segment, can you even believe that this fucking idiot is president? What the f***? He's so fucking dumb. I just don't get it. I mean, I get it, but it's still so bizarre. Like the real Trump derangement syndrome is hearing literally anything about the president and not responding with, "Oh, you mean that dumb, lying, cruel dipshit for angry morons? Oh, him?" And there were people standing around him when he said that, and not a single person said, how come every time desperate brown foreigners try to come here, you call them drug dealers and rapists and stuff? Because you did it with Mexicans, and you did it with caravans of asylum seekers, and you're doing it with hurricane refugees now. So hey man, what's that about? But nobody ever responds to any of the dumb shit this dumb motherfucker says out of his dumb as him mouth. He's standing right there. Shout, "Hey man, you claim that climate change is a hoax, but at Trump International Golf Links, you sought a permit to build a seawall and cited the need for one as sea level rise due to global warming. So what gives, man?" And sure, he'd just respond, "Yes, we're going to be looking into that quite greatly." Or, "Well, I don't know anything about that." And nobody will respond, "Well, shouldn't you, you dumb piece of shit?" Until he dies from being such a good president all the time. And that's the whole title of the segment, as well as the segment. So, end of segment. To make matters worse, people around the world who are displaced by climate change are not even legally recognized as refugees at all by the international community. There are zero protections for them whatsoever under international law. So, we're not really ready for this. And the United States is not meeting its obligations. This country is per capita the single greatest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions on the planet, and second in total emissions, and therefore has a pretty great, if not the greatest, responsibility for addressing climate change and dealing with the impact. And out of 232 countries in the world, we rank 174th in terms of population density. So it's not like we don't have the room.
The system is full. Can't take you anymore. Whether it's asylum, whether it's anything you want, it's illegal immigration, can't take you anymore. We can't take you. Our country is full.
We also rank 156th in terms of our birth rate, and we've seen countries like Japan struggle economically due to a declining population as they grapple with how they're going to support their aging population. This is why we've seen countries like Germany, who also has an extremely low birth rate, admit nearly 1 million refugees into their country during the Syrian refugee crisis. That and they did the Holocaust, so. But that policy is now reaping economic benefits for the country, as well as future heaven points. The bad news is that despite the economic benefits and very real heaven points, far right-wing groups have grown in popularity in response to this dreaded multiculturalism and more people to have babies with. Oh no. And violence against refugees has surged. And I don't know, right-wing nativism and violence towards marginalized groups isn't like a great combination in specifically Germany, literally anywhere else generally either. So I don't know, I started this episode by stating that the planet is going to be fine, and that's true. It will continue to exist and be classified as a planet. And I understand why well-meaning politicians talk about climate change's risk to the planet as shorthand for the fact that this is an existential threat. I just want us to recognize that what is really at stake here is not just that it's going to be hot outside more often, or that rich people are going to have to move out of their beachfront properties. It's that climate change is bringing some changes to our world that we're not quite currently equipped to deal with. And our current leadership is in fact denying those changes, and in this case, exacerbating the effects. It's not that I want to imagine a world in which racism and xenophobic fears give power to fascists who lock people up in camps. It's just that I don't need to use my imagination for that. Already, thousands of the migrants that have come to the US from Central American countries are coming because of catastrophic and starvation-inducing crop failures. And Trump's own administration knows this.
The Trump administration had in hand evidence presented to them by Customs and Border Protection, CBP, in which they collected data that indicated very clearly that climate change caused hunger, food insecurity, acute food insecurity, starvation basically, was causing migration to the United States.
And what did Trump do with this information? Well, he cut the aid to those countries. Aid being a thing he really likes to withhold in general, apparently. And taking a break from causing problems that lead to people coming here for help, he privately mused about shooting those people coming here for help in the legs to slow them down. But a boat filled with alligators and snakes doesn't have to be our future. The past few weeks, we've seen historic marches for action on climate change, led by a very happy young girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future, Greta Thunberg, who actually positioned this problem in the context it belongs in.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
And it's possible the people she's talking to and about are the same people that are cheering her on, and they don't know it and won't actually take action because they don't get it. Like let's say Barack Obama meets Greta. Little photo op. Proud of future generations for taking charge, with the 8-year president of the most powerful nation on the planet. A guy who recently said this.
And by the way, American energy production, you wouldn't always know it, but it went up every year I was president. And that whole suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest that was me, people. I just want you to.
Right on. Congrats on the oil stuff. Anyway, despite literally nobody who's ever been in charge actually doing the shit that needs to be done about this, the United States is the best positioned to handle the crisis. Not only are we the richest nation in the history of the world, but we are also the most successful country at absorbing and assimilating immigrants into our nation. Just, nationally, historically, it's our story. But also, there's been great and inspiring beneficial success stories in places like El Paso or the Twin Cities. Ilhan Omar is a refugee and a congresswoman, and incidentally works to pass legislation dealing with climate change specifically related to refugees.
My amendment includes recording the importance of the Paris Climate Agreement's task force addressing the impact of climate change on displacement and the global refugee crisis.
Oh, and here's some more news. We fixed the ozone layer because we decided to. Things get better if you decide to solve the problems, so let's decide to do that with this. So it's not hopeless. Just because President stares directly at the sun is in charge, that doesn't mean there isn't a movement growing. Just yesterday, before we filmed this, 1.5 million people protested in Bolivia against the burning of their forests. People are getting fed up with this shit, and it's making the liars and the naysayers sound a whole lot quieter. And even if we aren't able to get our act together in time, there's always a silver lining. There is some good news for worms who will be fine. Huzzah. What? Like and subscribe. Leave a nice comment. Check out our patreon.com/somemorenews and our podcast, Even More News. And we've got all social stuff. TeePublic has some merch for you. What?